So I scripted out a team flow, process flow, essentially, to, of course, match that offering. Whether you are a chef in the kitchen, the chef follows a script. That's the recipe for what they're cooking. The athlete follows a script. That's the playbook. They're running their plays. Those are all scripted. The actor, of course, knows their lines. That's a script. So when we look at ourselves no differently, okay, than these high-level performers, because we're in an industry that we can succeed at an extraordinary level.
What's interesting, though, is you use the concept of scripting, whether you knew it at the time or not. You use the concept of scripting to build a process that helped real estate agents win. And it also creates for consistency, which agents want. They thrive off of consistency. If things aren't consistent, then how do we ever know what to expect? We want a guaranteed result.
Matt Weaver, the #1 mortgage originator in the United States for most loans closed in 2023 and #1 in the state of Florida from 2020 to present, has spent over 27 years mastering the purchase market, earning more than 16 #1 titles across his career. Max Fisch, 2024's #1 originator in the United States under 30 and #2 in the state of Florida, achieved those titles within just 5 years of entering the mortgage industry, compressing decades of growth into a few extraordinary years. Collectively, they've helped more than 40,000 families purchase their first home. Now partners and looking to improve the industry on a national scale, Matt and Max share their winning formula, team structure, and systems with originators who want to scale from elite to extraordinary levels.
Matt, happy to be here with you again.
Always a delight, my friend.
Yeah, so what if I were to tell you, because we have a fun episode today.
Yeah.
What if I were to tell you that we're not going to do or talk about anything that we discussed on today's episode? Forget this, throw it out the window. What if I were to tell you that we were just going to completely just wing it?
I would say that's completely ridiculous.
Well,
how you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because that's just how a lot of people function,
yeah.
Right? And we talk off air quite often about scripting and how important that is in everything that we're doing. And we'll talk today about, how that is helpful in our personal relationships and helpful professionally. And I think what we've come to the conclusion of is it's just a matter of time until people realize that the things they do are scripted most of the time.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Whether intentionally or unintentionally. And so I'm curious, and we'll just jump right into it. Right. I'm curious to know, when did you realize that? Like, how did this scripting process start for you, at least when you realized it versus when you were doing it unintentionally? And let's just talk about it, because your famous saying is everything in life is scripted, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
You're exactly correct. Everything in life is scripted when you stop to think about it. It actually hit me several years while being scripted to understand how scripted I was. Several years later, as an example, I guess, my personality, I'm more of an analytical person. And I would tend to think that more or less analytical people, I would say, are more scripted-based people when they're under pressure. When I say under pressure, I mean that loosely. So whether you're going to be doing a sales presentation, whether you're trying to develop a process flow, you tend to lean on scripting things out or developing a process around it because it's just the way you function. You don't wing things. So I would think that for analytical people, it's probably a little bit more second nature to be more scripted. But my story in terms of scripting out the process, which I didn't really understand that it was fully scripted at the time, that's the irony to this, really kind of started back in 2010. It was 2010 when I decided to develop a process flow to specialize in working with real estate agents. So it was at that time I first said to myself, if I'm going to specialize in working with real estate agents and they're going to be my #1 customer, then I have to develop value propositions that wrap their sales cycle from beginning to end. So when I looked at the real estate agent sales cycle, okay, I asked myself, okay, if they're going to engage with a buyer or when they're going to engage with a buyer, that buyer is either going to pay cash or they're going to get a mortgage, a loan. So then my first pillar of value should be my pre-approval process. my pre-approval process should serve their first interaction with the customer. And of course, after they're showing the home to that prospective buyer that's well qualified, and that prospective buyer falls in love with the home, then my second pillar of value should be my offer process, because now they're going to be making an offer in a home. And that's the second part to their sales cycle. The third part to their sales cycle, now that they're under contract, is from contract through to closing, which my third pillar of value is my service advantage, contract to closing. And then if you think about it, how do we repeat the cycle again? How do we get more buyers and sellers for our agents, which is my pillar 4, growing together? So when I wrote out all of these value propositions, then I asked myself, now, how do I fulfill these value propositions? What is my process wrapped around it? So as an example, my number one pillar, my number one value proposition to agents has always been my pre-approval process. So I said, how do I design a pre-approval process that operates when they operate? They operate 7 days a week, so that means we have to operate 7 days a week. They operate usually at a minimum between the hours of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., so that means we have to operate between the hours of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. And they usually work through or operate through holidays, certain holidays, I'll say. So when I looked at my pre-approval process, I said, how do I have a process that's 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., 364 days a year, only close Christmas Day? So I scripted out a team flow, process flow, essentially, to, of course, match that offering. So it was 2010, 2011, as I'm building this process out, I'm really a scripted person. I don't know that I'm a scripted person in doing this, but it just seems so natural because it was the only way I can fulfill what it is that I'm trying to do. One of my favorite restaurants here in Boca Raton is Houston's. And my wife and I go there all the time. I've been going there since I was 13 years old. And Houston's is really known for, did they have great food? They have great food. Is it like the top of the line? Not the top of the line. But what they're really known for is their level of consistency in service. So I wanted to emulate a lot of that in my process by having consistency and high quality of service. And I believe that the only way that I was able to pull that off, and I still believe to this day, the only way that anyone can pull that off is by having a scripted process from beginning to end. So really charting out that journey. And then if the journey ends up being, if the consumers, the customers like that journey, then you keep building off of that script and you keep following the same script. So this is why we say here today that everything in life is scripted. Almost every service we render is scripted, right? Being going to a restaurant or a religious function of some sort, they're all following a process. But when it comes to, let's say, real estate and mortgage, we tend to steer away from developing a scripted process. Now, I want to go back to the fact that I didn't know how scripted I was in 2010, 11, 2012, 13, etc. And then I met one of my mentors, Mike Ferry, and it was 2015, 2016. I'm sitting at one of his superstar retreats, and he starts talking the fact of the importance of scripting. And as he's really talking about scripting in detail and how every service follows a scripted process, that's when it really hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, wow, I really am a scripted person. So now it's just more pronounced and it's talked about more. Thanks to Mike, I talk about it more by using that word. But you're right. Here's the challenge. Most people, when they hear the word script, it's like something that's unauthentic or something that they're uncomfortable about or doesn't seem real, or you're a robot. When in pure reality, any type of great service or any type of athlete or whatever it may be all follows a scripted process. And now that we're together here, I think you can agree that embracing, even though you were pretty scripted yourself, I don't think you were aware of it, but I think it's becoming more pronounced to you because now we're now talking the same language. Would you agree with that?
Sure. I mean, I used to think that it was the cool thing to do was to wing something.
Right.
Right. Like it comes with a level of, oh, I don't need to, read anything, or I don't need to think about what I'm going to say. I'll just do it.
Right.
Right. But here's the reality, because for everybody watching, you just looked at me that entire time. But what you just told me was a script. You've shared that a bunch of times. Your 4 pillars of value, your story, and that becomes scripted. I didn't realize that as well. I mean, so I used to, before I stood up in front of a lot of people, I used to rehearse things in my head. right? But I would tell myself, I'm not going to bring up a piece of paper, right? Because that would be scripting.
Correct.
As if like me rehearsing something in my head that I knew that I was going to say wasn't scripting. Right. So I just feel like that there's this negative connotation of scripting always has to be, hey, let's sit here and read this.
Right.
Into everybody. It doesn't need to be like that. It's just organization, which we'll go into. But one thing that was interesting about what you just mentioned was when you're talking about your process, some people feel like scripting is all about what you say verbally and how you act, and you need to be like super robotic. Right. What's interesting, though, is you use the concept of scripting, whether you knew it at the time or not. You use the concept of scripting to build a process that helped real estate agents win, which I want originators to understand that, right? Because what I feel like the industry as a whole does is it talks about me on your value proposition, right? So when we're talking to real estate, and I was guilty of it, right, early on in my career. Hey, why should I work with you? Well, I communicate well. I'm a nice guy, right? Like I wasn't saying these things, but that's the value proposition.
Correct.
Right. And whether you script that or not, it's about me.
Right.
What you did is you took a script and you built out a process flow that doesn't only say, hey, here's how I'm winning. Right. But it says you're equipping the real estate agent with here's how you can win, which I think is the definition of a true partnership. Right. It's a service you're rendering. I'm equipping you with the tools that you can use to win in your business, which I think is a complete flip off of how people approach situations, especially originators around the country, which is, hey, I'm going to tell you how I'm winning, and that's why you should work with me.
Right.
Rather than the flip. How can I help you win?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the way I looked at it was I am a service provider to real estate agents. So while I'd like to think that, I can, engage in a relationship with them and all that, that's fine. But really what I wanted my value proposition to be wasn't necessarily my personality. It was more of my system.
Yeah.
And in order to provide them with a system that was accountable, that was consistent, it has to follow a process. And so that's where I think a lot of originators miss the mark. They're kind of just doing an act, or they're doing whatever it may be, kind of winging it, essentially, as you mentioned, where for my process, it's been the same consistent process. So as an example, we talk about the pre-approval process. We talk about how it's 7 days a week, how it's 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., 364 a year, how we take our application live by phone. It's 10 minutes. Once we have the documents, it's a 2 to 4 hour review time. Then we go into home buyer consultation. All of that is charted out. All of that is scripted.
Yep.
And our real estate agents, become, number one, they love it and they become dependent on it. And they value the fact of it being the same process over and over again. It's no different than McDonald's and their burger, or Wendy's and their burger as well. They wanted it to taste the same each and every time. So an originator can say, when we were in a multiple offer, an originator can say, hey, I can try and help you win in a multiple offer. What I chose to say is I have these 7 elements of structuring a winning offer. Let me go over these 7 steps with you. See, it's just more formalizing, packaging, scripting out what your service offering is so you can eloquently describe it to the customer you're trying to serve. And that, I think, is a big difference between what it is that we do here on our team structure, let's say, versus a lot of originators in the business. But the good news is a lot of originators can start doing that and start adopting that if they just kind of think a little bit differently on the matter. The second part to that is like presentation. You were mentioning the fact of you would go in and you do a presentation and you would kind of script it in your mind. And now you had to remember or draw off that because you didn't want to walk in there with a notepad or perhaps a script, etc. And I was like that from, let's say, 2010 to 2015. So I would do a lot of presentation, as you know, we do today. But I was doing a lot of presentation for those 5 years. And I was doing everything in my power to memorize what it is that I was going to say. I would rehearse for hours on end. My kids, when they were super young, 3, 4, 5 years old, they would hear me rehearsing, walking around the house all the time because I was petrified of walking into a presentation with a script. And it was in 2016. I relate this again back to Mike, my mentor, where I went to his superstar retreat. I'm told he's one of the most fascinating real estate speakers you can listen to. He holds a room of 4,000 or 5,000 agents for days on end, single speaker. So I get to the superstar retreat and I'm there, and I'll never forget it. 9 a.m. he starts and he's got a notepad in his hand. And I'm thinking to myself, what's he going to do with that notepad? And the entire retreat, he's reading off of his notepad. In fact, he's making jokes. He'll even point down to the script that says, tell joke now. So I guess I'm going to tell a joke. And it was at that moment, Max, that I said, oh my gosh, the audience doesn't care that you have your notes in your hand. They care about the information you're sharing. They care about you being buttoned up and delivering it to what the audience deserves. So Mike would always talk about the fact that whether you're an actor, whether you're an athlete, whether you are a chef in the kitchen, the chef follows a script. That's the recipe for what they're cooking. The athlete follows a script. That's the playbook. They're running their plays. Those are all scripted. The actor, of course, knows their lines. That's a script. So when we look at ourselves no differently, okay, than these high-level performers, because we're in an industry that we can succeed at an extraordinary level. You know that. And I hope every originator knows that. So we're in an industry where you can earn equal to an actor, okay, equal to an athlete, etc. So if we got as intense as an athlete does for their scripts, i.e. their plays, and did that for what it is that we're doing, how far would we go? Would we give the customer, being the agent and the home buyer, would we give them a higher quality of service if we were true and in fact scripted with our process and consistent with it? That's the question we got to ask ourselves.
Well, I can make an argument that a lack of script, right, and not taking the time to script out a circumstance or what you're going to say to somebody is a lack of discipline, right? Because I have yet to meet somebody, okay? Forget originators, right? I've just yet to meet somebody that doesn't script because a script would make them sound less intelligent or know less of what they're talking about. That doesn't make any sense. Right. Now, again, we're not talking about being robotic, but we need to make sure that if we're with what we're doing, if we respect what we're doing and we take it serious, then scripting and learning and figuring out what to say in certain situations with objections or whatever it is a form of discipline.
Yes.
Right. They correlate directly.
Yes.
And so I think that that's important for people to understand because whatever you're doing, you can get to a certain level, right, without, just on natural ability. Let's just call it, right? Forget winging it. Just on natural ability, you can get to a certain level. But then if you want to scale or you want to take it beyond that point, there needs to be a script, which I think we do super well on our team, as you referenced, when it comes to our process flow and just the way that we talk to people and the way that we answer. And here's what we do in these situations, and everybody speaking the same language. And that creates for a good culture. And it also creates for consistency, which agents want. They thrive off of consistency. If things aren't consistent, then how do we ever know what to expect? We want a guaranteed result. Right. If you put a coin in the machine, this is what happens. Right. Which I think is important. But what danger do you see? Because I can think of a bunch of situations, but what danger do you see in an originator? Let's talk originators specifically.
Yes.
Not being scripted. Let's just talk about winging it.
Oh, right. I mean, the immediate danger is just low level of production. Low level of production. Sure. If you think about it, the idea for the originator that wants to scale to a high level, that wants to originate to a high level, okay, the idea there is you have to duplicate the process.
Yeah.
And the only way that you can duplicate the process over and over again and scale a process is by having a process. If you don't have a process, then of course it's impossible to close 500 units a year, 750 units a year, 1,000 units a year, 1,500 units a year. I mean, the only way of doing that is by having a scripted process flow. Otherwise, it's virtually impossible. The second is unprofessional. Unprofessional. If you think about it, going into a presentation, okay, who's going to be more well received? Someone who is organized with their thoughts and hitting all the points that they want, or someone going in there not taking it as serious? You hit a key word, taking it serious. What I would want every originator that's listening to this is to think of every presentation as a performance. Every presentation is a performance. And so if we look at each presentation as a performance, then we're going to take it serious like a performer. And performers study their script, study their material, know what they're going to say. I do probably, 120 seminars a year, okay? And I'm emphatic on reviewing my material over and over again because the audience deserves the best from us. So it doesn't matter if you're presenting in front of 5 agents, 15 agents, or 4,000 agents and everything in between. They deserve the best. And the way that you can give them the best is by having organized thoughts, i.e. a script, and knowing what to say and hitting all of your points that you want to hit. And I got to tell you something, it makes it so much easier for you as the originator. Think about how easy it is. You don't have to keep figuring it out every time. A strong presentation makes the sale easier.
Yeah. Can I talk about presentation for a second?
Yeah.
Because it just came in my head. Presentation is so important. So we talk about how the idea of scripting has a negative connotation.
Yes.
When we say presentation, we're not talking about just always standing up in front of a room.
Right.
That's a form of presentation, right? But here's where not being scripted has lost me business. And I know it has, right? So starting off in my career, I came from the football world. I was a sports guy and, I used to chum it up and you're just kind of always just, figuring things out.
How are the Giants?
Yeah. Just, whatever, talking about the Dolphins or whatever it is. Right. And so that I carried that into my business life, which was, I was the guy that we could sit down, we could have lunch, we could talk about, sports and we could just figure it out, which isn't a bad thing. Right. I don't want to come across as talking about sports and talking about personal life. That's not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
The problem is there was no structure mentally in my mind to any type of conversation, what we were doing, what the outcome of that conversation, how we could leave it off and things of that nature. And so what was interesting is I would have meetings where I found myself having no general direction of what the conversation was supposed to be about or where it was going or what I actually wanted to say. There was always this underlying tone, and it's because I didn't think about it. And over the course of the years, obviously we've both done very well, but I'm sure that there's times where our presentation was lacking script, and that ended up potentially losing us business.
Yes.
Right. And so what's interesting is when we talk specifically about presentation, I want to make it clear that some people listening might be like, well, I don't do presentations. You do a presentation every single conversation you have.
Every single conversation.
It's all a presentation. And again, the negative connotation of that isn't that you're being an actor. Like, oh, I'm acting. Right. But it's that you have an intentional goal in mind about what this conversation is going to be about, with a certain level of versatility to be able to have conversations without sounding too robotic. But my point is that if somebody brings up, for example, hey, Matt, what do you do? Boom. I know what I do. Why? Because I've thought about it and I've thought about how to deliver it and I've thought about how to tell somebody that. Right. If somebody says, what do you guys do well? What's your value proposition? Boom. I know what that is. Right. And so it's very important to understand that the presentation in our conversations, how we carry ourselves, how we look at people, our mannerisms, those types of things are all important for originators to know, because again, that can really impact the way that somebody's receiving the information, the people you're talking to, how they're receiving the information, and also it can impact their comfortability level with you. Right. And so I just think that's important to mention, because when we talk about We always talk about off air. We talk about break even win or break even loss.
I was just about to go there.
Can I do it?
Yeah, please.
You want it?
Please. No.
All right, so I'm going to do it. Then you tell me if I'm missing anything. So you introduced me to this concept, right? And it's a great thing to live by when you're making decisions. And so a break even win would be you're not offending anybody. You're not losing at all. It's at worst, it's neutral, but it's only up, right? And then the opposite for break even loss. So when we talk about scripting in our presentation, I have never once seen a situation or heard of a situation, I'd be interested to know, that if you carry yourself appropriately, if you effectively prepare for a situation, a conversation, or a presentation in front of a bunch of people, that's a loss.
Correct.
At worst, it's, oh, well, he really knows what he's talking about.
Right.
But you can only gain.
Yes.
If you just wing it.
Correct.
There's very few situations where that's going to be a win. At worst, it's going to be, okay, I guess he knows what he's talking about. But there's going to be some people, or you might say something that's a loss.
Correct.
Right? Am I tracking correctly on that?
You're hitting it 100% on. So, because if you think about it, right? So we are on the mortgage side of the industry, we are originators, and we are going to these agents and asking them to refer their most prized asset, which is their customer. And if you think about it, okay, a really, really good agent, which there are so many out there, they're very passionate about their customer. So in essence, the agent is now your customer. So as an originator, your customer is the agent. You're not equal to them. You're none of that. They are a customer to you. So they deserve the best from you. And the way to give them the best is to have an organized process flow, an organized conversation, meaning when I say organized conversation, it's not to be disingenuous by no means. It's to be organized. It's to be able to walk them through your value propositions, what you do differently, your process flow, because you're trying to sell them onto you as an originator and why they should use your services. So the effective way, in my opinion, of doing that is to first start from the base framework of being organized and having a scripted process, so you can eloquently describe that to the agent. And then, of course, when their home buyer calls you, you can eloquently describe to them what your process is. If a home buyer calls us today, all the way to today, it's been the same exact, we're going to say, script, okay? Meaning we walk them through our process the same exact way for 15 years. Takes about a minute and a half, okay? It's got about a 99% conversion rate from, oh, thank you so much, going directly into application for pre-approval. They don't ask any questions. The home buyer doesn't ask really any questions because we've hit all the points in our process flow, describing it to them. So it becomes very organized. So you can think about how efficient that is for us as a team, where if we were all just kind of saying it differently each and every time what our process is, it might turn into a 15, a 20, a 30-minute conversation. There might be innuendos that are starting to be talked about that aren't even relevant to the conversation.
Sure.
The customer called to get pre-approved. Just walk them through your process and get them into the pre-approval process. So I think originators are giving themselves, as you brilliantly call, a self-cap. We talk about that self-cap all the time for so many different ways and so many different reasons as to how someone has a self-cap. Not having an organized, scripted process is a self-cap.
Sure. And what I find fascinating too is a scripted process is not just in business or professionally, right? It's also in our personal relationship. So would I be off base, okay, by saying that the values we live by, right, whether it's in our relationships and parenting or, whatever it is that we're doing, leadership, mission statements, the values that we live by and the morals we live by, those are scripts.
Yes.
Right. And then when we talk about how to live those out,
right,
those are also scripts.
Your workout routine is a script.
Yeah. So we're talking about how scripting is so intertwined with every single thing that we do, which is important. And then, what's interesting, and to kind of bring it back to something I said 10 minutes ago, what's interesting is when people say, wow, that guy's really disciplined. What are they talking about? They're pretty much just saying that he's scripted.
Yes.
It's so funny how those terms. So you know what? We should start doing that. We should start if people have this negative connotation about script.
Yeah.
All right, let's just be disciplined.
Let's just be disciplined. There you go. You can use that word.
There you go. It works interchangeably because at the end of the day, to be disciplined, we need to be scripted.
Correct.
So that's another way to describe scripting.
Yes.
And it's so important because when we talk about like things that we do in parenting, I mean, if you look at winging it, all right, we'll just wing it.
Yeah.
Right. No, there's certain foundational things that every family has.
Right.
Hey, we're going to do this. We're not going to do this. We're going to eat dinner at this time. We're going to go at school at this time. I mean,
Right.
everything.
Right. The kids go to sleep at a certain time. They brush their teeth at a certain time. They wake up at a certain time. I mean, everything is scripted.
Yeah. And if originators, if you're running teams, small team, large team, it's a great cultural builder to come up with a script of how you are going to lead.
Yes.
Right. And that's not just so that the people that you're leading become scripted. It's also because what it does is it helps gain respect, right? It helps you stay organized, and it helps the overall organization when we understand here's the direction that we want to go.
It creates unification.
Absolutely.
So our team, of course, we have one unified goal, and the way that we get to this goal, okay, is through our process that every single team member knows through and through from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And that's what creates that synergistic flow.
Well, it's this idea of a cruise ship.
Yeah.
I used this analogy with you the other day.
Yeah.
It was something else, but it's the same idea, meaning the cruise ship, there's a million things that people are doing on a cruise ship. Some people are working the water park, they're working the buffet, they're doing shows, you have actors, and you have all these things. But guess what? Doesn't matter, because that cruise ship is going to one destination.
Yes.
And every single person on that boat knows where they're going.
Because the captain's following us.
Yeah, because the captain, well, you better hope so.
You better hope.
Right? The captain's disciplined.
What if he winged it?
Yeah. You're just out in the ocean figuring out where you're going. Right. No, listen, I think that that's an important thing to know. And I don't think that should turn people off from finding a good mentor. If a mentor brings up, well, I shouldn't say if, I guess if they're a good mentor, they're going to talk about discipline. They're going to talk about script. So don't let that turn you off. Now, here's what I think people should guard against, right? You still want to follow your script in your belief system, because I think what's dangerous is, well, I shouldn't say that universally, right? We all follow somebody else's script with things that we're doing, right? If you go to a sports game, you're following the way they do things. You show your ticket here, you do so on and so forth. But I think what my point is I think that we need to be careful on what scripts we're following, right? And so that we can continue to think for ourselves.
Yes.
Right? Especially in the day and age of artificial intelligence and all these things. You mentioned you're a writer.
Yes.
Right? And you like to conceptualize. It helps keep your brain sharp and keep it going.
Right.
When we get into a groove of following other people's scripts too much, I think it can be dangerous. Do you agree?
It depends if you embody their script or not. I mean, if you have the same mission, the same cause, the same why, then of course it's okay. But then, like the whole ChatGPT thing and trying to figure out how to respond. I mean, look, you know how I feel about that. I mean, I think there's use for AI here and there, but I don't want it to numb my brain. So I'm really, I guard against that, as you would say.
Which is important because when we aren't in alignment with somebody else's script, we need to be able to think for ourselves.
Yep.
Right. And you need to be able to develop a script in how you're going to live your life personally, professionally, spiritually, whatever it is for an individual, centered around your belief systems.
Right. You take their framework if it's something that you identify with. Okay. You take their base framework and you might add or tweak. As an example, we just came off of Winning with Objections.
Uh-huh.
That was a seminar series that you are now doing.
Yeah.
Okay. For our agents, I think we've done now, I want to say 15 of these seminars for agents.
Yeah.
And we go into talking about the 11 objections amongst the most popular 11 objections amongst home buyers and sellers. And we give them scripts. So we cover the script on how to handle the objection. But we go into it, as you recall, Max, of saying to them, this is base framework. Add a sentence, modify a word, but overall, if you agree with the general direction, then that's really important. And I think what would be, I think, prudent for the originator that's listening that may be a little, let's say, guarded against scripts. A script doesn't mean word by word. It doesn't mean you're actually reading every single word. So as an example, when I do a presentation, okay, I'll know what I'm saying overall. My script will have my bullet points that I'll cover.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm not going to, of course, go up there and read. I mean, it's not a speech. I mean, a speech you can read word by word, but a presentation's a little bit differently. But overall, I can tell you and everyone that's listening, hands down, 100%, being scripted, having a scripted process solely is the number one cause of how I was able to achieve the amount of closed transactions in my career that I have done.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest takeaway of everything that we're talking about, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not a limitation.
Right.
Right. And I feel as if originators need to hear that there are variations to your point of scripting, right? Like your own, again, not necessarily just your own belief system as an underlying tone, but also your own personality, right? If I say something that you say, if both of us were reading the exact same thing right now, right? It would come across different from me than it would be if you said it.
Right.
And there's just mannerisms, there's personality traits. I'm much better looking.
So you think.
But those types of things matter, right? So that's why it's important to remain disciplined. And when you have a script, if you're taking something from somebody else, make your own variation of it. Because sometimes when you read it, and this is sometimes really the danger of AI, when you read it, it's not you.
It's not you.
Right. And it's so important to make it you.
Right.
Right. And so that concept, I think is super valuable in building your business and in your relationships and the way that you do things and the way you lead. And we could just keep going on and on.
Right.
About it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that at the end of the day, for the originator that's not necessarily embodying this concept, it just puts them at a disadvantage. You can get away with originating X amount of transactions, but if you are truly seeking to go to that next level, that next tier of success in this great industry that we're in, you should heavily consider mapping out a process flow, seeing how it works in your structure, taking away the parts that make it work. Adding those parts that make it work, and any parts that don't, of course, modifying that and replacing them. So over the past 15 years, the base process that we have had has been the same, but all the micro steps in between have been tweaked, enhanced, moved from over here to over here. And it's actually the fun part about it. Think of it as one big conveyor belt. Okay, a conveyor belt system, and those bottles coming down the conveyor belt line, and the caps being put on each bottle. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to manufacture a loan, okay, over and over again in high scale. And in order to do that, or the ability to be able to do that, is you have to have that process in place.
Yeah.
So think of it as more of a challenge to yourself and to your business, which will allow you to get to that next level.
So let me ask you a question as we wind up, right? One last question.
Sure.
How do you think that constant learning, right? Because we're told to learn throughout our entire life. How do you think that constant learning, whether that be reading or listening or everywhere in between, how do you think that can help us develop our own script and the things that we do?
Well, we should always be a ferocious learner.
Yeah.
I mean, you know that. You are one.
Yeah.
I am one. The way that we do that is we read all the time. We take time. It's huge. We take time out of our day to read, to learn. And when you do that, when you have the ability to continuously learn, okay, it opens your mind to new things. I just give you an example. Every morning I make it a point for about 30 to 35 minutes to read an article or two. And I'll always read the articles of, let's say, Starbucks takes on a new CEO. And I want to read that article. I want to understand what the mind of that CEO is going to do to this large organization.
See, that's key.
Okay, in scale to right the ship. If their sales are down, what are they doing? Because clearly he's been hired because he sees something differently.
Yep.
And I find that so fascinating because he has to make moves at the top that just feed into thousands and thousands of stores to move a market. And I find that really, really fascinating. But the only way that we're able to, let's say, implement any of that
Is
into
continue to
our business is by learning
Yeah.
and reading off of what others are doing. It's the power of mentorship in a sense. Like I'm reading about this Starbucks CEO. I mean, this guy's got a big job on his hands.
Yep.
Sales are down for Starbucks and he wants to bring the culture back. So I'm following it because I'm so interested. So I think having curiosity to a high degree of others doing it at a higher scale is really, really interesting. And then it can also bleed through to what it is that we do.
Yeah. So long story short, scripting isn't a bad thing. And if we don't want to use the word scripting, let's use discipline.
There we go.
Right? Long story short, which is what we do here on our team.
Yes.
So as always, Matt, I appreciate you taking the time today.
Max, you know how it is.
Thank you. See you on the next one.
You bet. On this episode, we talk about the power of scripts. But inside F13, we give you the entire blueprint, including scripts, that help build the #1 team in the nation. If you want more information, visit think13.com.
For those ready to transcend the origination cycle, to not just close more, but to live more, we built Originate for Life. It's an ecosystem where you can choose your lane in the origination cycle and really lean into what you do best. So whether you want to scale or retain your business, you can do so without burnout. Every other part of the cycle is supported by the ecosystem. For more information, visit originateforlife.com.